many interruptions, and I'm just going to pop myself on spotlight for a moment and welcome you to today's talk. So this is an etc. talk. It's part of Draw Brighton's program of kind of supplementary talks, lectures, artist interviews, where we dig a little bit deeper into the practices of the artists that we work with at Draw and that we admire as well. And this is a real treat to have a bit of both here with Chloe. Chloe and I met several years ago online on Zoom here. We have since met in person, and she's every bit as wonderful as she is online, with all of her warmth and generosity and enthusiasm for drawing. And so this is a real wonderful opportunity to share a little bit more about Chloe's work and to be able to ask her a few questions about her attitudes to drawing, ideas around drawing, and how her own practice as an artist and an educator has evolved over the previous, well, X amount of years. We'll find out in a moment. So shortly, I'm going to be switching over to a slideshow of images that Chloe's kindly prepared for us. And she's going to be telling us a little bit about each one of those images. And we're just going to chat back and forth. It's good to think about this as a kind of illustrated pub trip, where we're all just sitting around with a drink in a Parisian cafe, I imagine, and finding out a little bit more about Chloe and her work. And once we get started, I'm going to put that slideshow on the main screen, but in a moment, I'll just introduce Chloe and just give her a little moment to say hi and give a little wave. This session is funded by the Draw Patreon, so thank you very much to all of our supporters on Patreon. We are very appreciative, and the recording of it is going to be available publicly on our YouTube, but also on our Patreon afterwards. So just thanks to everyone that's contributed to that. Chloe, welcome. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Jake. I feel very honored, actually. And yeah, it's been magic meeting you. It's been a short time, but I feel like I've known you for a long time. One of those friendships.
Yeah. Well, and it is wonderful that you have been able to visit here as well, because I feel like you've left a trace of yourself with your drawing that you left here, and it sort of cements some of that connection. One day I'm going to come be nosy and have come say hi in Paris.
Well, I've just invited you. I invited everybody, actually. To my very tiny studio, it would be really nice if everyone turned up. Wouldn't know where to put you all, but it would be very nice. We just spill out onto the street.
Um, shall we launch in? Shall I get our first image up on the screen?
Yes, please, because it would be nice to come off the spotlight, actually.
Yeah.
Right now, it'll be a small box.
Here we go. So to begin our story, where are we starting?
Well, you proposed that I selected 20 images or 20 slides to tell a story, something of my work and my journey. And I realized after I'd put them all together that they actually reflect 20 years. And this was 2003. These two drawings were made in a drawing class that was run by a fashion illustrator called Neil Gilks. He ran these summer programs at Central St. Martin's on Charing Cross Road. And at the time I was working at Rochester, Kayad in Rochester. It was my first teaching job, teaching drawing. And I actually got that first teaching job by writing a manifesto early in 2000 about drawing and how I would propose to teach drawing, because it was not something that during my fine art education that many people were doing, and it was something that was so much part of me. So I had this idea I'd write this manifesto, which is quite a big word to say it's a manifesto, but I wrote on one page of A4 how I would propose to teach drawing and my enthusiasm and passion for it, and I sent it blind to art schools, and I got my first teaching job at Kayad in Rochester. And at that time, there was support for for artist research and artist development. And we discovered this amazing summer program run by Neil. It was a week long, and basically he put on music just like I do on Mondays, and he had his friends come and pose, and he worked with such pleasure and abandon and excitement. I would have to say, I've written it to him since, but he repaired everything that I'd put back everything I'd lost over my kind of formal art education to do with drawing. He put all the pleasure back. And I mean, I'm just immensely grateful, because I came out, walked down Charing Cross Road, and I was like, wow, this is it. This is it. I can't leave this alone again. And you could just see these are really fast drawings, and he would do this, had this amazing technique where he would just mix a splosh of paint, and he'd always show it. He always brave enough to do demonstrations, which is, as those of you who teach drawing know, is a hard thing to do. But he'd put some 80s pop on and just like splosh the paint on, and it was all passionate. And the lines were free, and this was the beginning for me. So that's 20 years ago. If you could do the next slide, please. Then I realized, as I was talking to you before everyone came in, but all of these slides actually represent, I think, a moment where I took my work seriously, or I decided that I would invest in it in some way, even if at this point, which is 2007, I didn't have any money. I was living in London, teaching in Maidstone at that point. But I decided to have a studio, which is pretty mad. And I think lots of people will identify with this. When you don't have any money, but you decide to have a studio and keep hold of it for a bit. And this was off Camberwell New Road. And I made these drawings of hair static. I can't really say too much about them, in just these were these strange drawings I was making at that time. I actually put them into the Jerwood Drawing Prize, and I was one of the ones who had to go and collect them because they weren't selected. But you'll see later on in my story that I'm now involved in that prize. But if you could move on to the next one. And this again was another moment of saying, I'm going to be with my work, no matter what my circumstances are, really. And this was a wonderful invitation. By this point, I was living in Paris, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but I was offered a cat sitting job over the summer. One of my colleagues asked me to look after her house, and her partner had a studio. And I spent this very solitary 10 days just working in it. And I made these drawings, which, when I look at them now, are so key to what I'm doing and what I'm thinking about. I had a collection of vintage dresses. I still have them. And I made these by taping together 4 sheets of A1 size paper. I don't think I had at that point either the funds for like a big roll, but I taped them together, and I threw the dress and then drew around the forms and filled them in with the most black charcoal that I could find. And I wanted the process of me filling in these shapes, the dress where my body had been. I wanted the charcoal dust to print my body in movement, trying to kind of in action, trying to kind of pin these dresses down. They are very badly photographed. And I think this has been something, in retrospect, I think taking one's work seriously is also about caring for it and documenting it. And I have a wonderful friend, Catherine, who has always been on my case about that and was very angry that had drawings stored under a bed that weren't fixed properly. Or again, I think people could probably identify that with that.
For the presentation of work, were a lot of these exhibited on walls, or have they mostly existed as drawings that have then been documented like this? Like, do you think the exhibition and the showing of the work is important to the creation of it?
These have never been shown, but a version of them has. I actually, a friend of mine who is a fashion designer asked me to make some drawings of her process. And I did the same thing. So I tried to capture the shapes that she was cutting and draping. They happened to be black dresses. And I did the same thing where I was moving and kind of printing. So there was something about the shifting shapes and the pattern cutting process. So they were a version that was shown in a gallery space, but these have never been shown. As with, I would say, a huge part of my work. Mm-hmm. My work's been made, it's been made as part of my life, but it's not been shown. I sometimes think when you go around in an exhibition of a famous artist's work, and there's a room at the beginning which is the early work. I always loved the early work, but I think
that you feel all the potential there, don't you? The
yeah,
performance of the ideas.
yeah, and I think where would my early work start? And it's sad that we don't take care of the early work necessarily, do we? Unless we're very smart about it. But I probably, this is something which is maybe in retrospect and putting this together is, and those people who know me probably too, is I'm somebody who's incredibly present and excited about being in the moment. I'm not very nostalgic about the past, or um, have a great attachment to these things. But it's been an amazing process to kind of look back at them. But you could maybe move to the next one. So this, I think I know lots of familiar faces in the crowd, so you know this story already. But in 2008, I took a job in Paris to be the head of foundation at what was then Parsons Paris. So it was an American art school, private art school, which meant changing my life completely. So I was in my early 30s, and the proposition of moving to Paris was so exciting, obviously. But to work for a private art school, never, it didn't at the time, and it still doesn't now, align with my values. And I come from, my parents were teachers, and so what I did when I first went there in that first year is I thought, how can I share more widely than this privileged space that I found myself in. And I read at the time, in Artist Newsletter, there was a letter by Maurice Carlin, who created Islington Mill Art Academy, which is still going really strong. And he and a group of friends being disillusioned by art education. They'd just done their foundation, and they didn't know where they would go to do a degree, and they decided to just set up on their own. And I was really inspired by their story, and he's a brilliant man, a brilliant, intelligent visionary person, Morris. And I wrote to him and I said, would you like some drawing classes? And I would send them to you by post. And he said, yeah, that sounds amazing, but could I get some other, he had friends who'd made other groups similar to his in Manchester, well, they were in Manchester, sorry, in Berlin, Marseille, and Glasgow. And so what happened was a 6-week project where every week I printed these instructions for a drawing class and I sent them by post from Paris. And these groups of people followed my prompts and had a kind of 6-week drawing experience without ever having met me. And that was a really in person, and that was a very powerful experience, not least because of how well it worked and how invested they were in it. And I thought, God, you know, that my words could activate some kind of experience. And very importantly, I think, was the graphic identity of this project, which was very immediate and intuitive at the time. I use stencils for writing instructions on generic instructions that people buy, you can buy in a hardware store in France, for saying like, don't park here, or and this is a prompt about called heart drawing exercise, and I asked them to make a true copy of the Leonardo da Vinci drawing of a heart, and then to turn their drawing and his drawing to the wall so they couldn't see it, and to go far away from the studio and run back, and then with a fast beating heart to redraw the heart. So it was and this drawing exercise has been, this went in all different places. People have published it, and I've done it in many different contexts. And so that was in 2008, and I think really formative in terms of what I do now. So the next one. Yeah,
it's interesting that as you're talking about this physical experience that's running in parallel with the actual drawing experience, that that we have that alongside the detachment of the delivery of that lesson as well. So, you know, although you are doing this at a distance and you're giving people these tasks through the post, there's still a sense of physical presence that you're encouraging in the students. I think that's wonderful, and it parallels so well with what you're doing now as well, you know, sort of 16 years later, trying to kind of engage with people in a very human and tactile way, but over vast distances.
Yeah, that's amazingly put. It's true. I feel very present with all the people I work with now, even though some are, I know, and some of them are here on the other side of the world. But one really funny story with this was I was very dedicated to it. So I went every Wednesday and sent my instructions by post. And on one week, they didn't arrive in Manchester on time for their class that they'd set up. So they went round the studios where they were, the Islington Mill, and asked people for other instructions because they wanted to do something. And then they reported back that they just were like, it didn't work because they wanted mine. But I don't know what that was in that, you know, why mine had some connection to them, or it wasn't about getting any instructions from anywhere. It was about getting these specific ones. That was interesting. I've got interviews with the group. I actually met them in Berlin and interviewed. I've got recordings of them talking about it, and I need to revisit that because there's so much in there that fascinates me about teaching and learning and drawing and, yeah, connecting with people. Maybe the next one, Jake. So I started by Neil's class, which got me drawing again, basically, in this very emotive, passionate way. Then I think probably I stalled with the hair static because they were a bit clever. And this, I think, marks a moment where I'm like, just stop being clever about it. What's that all about? This kind of was holding me back. And I have such a strong memory of making this drawing. So this is my parents live in southwest France, and they've had the house since I was a child, and there are lots of wonderful caves that you can go and the most beautiful cave drawings nearby. And it's ancient tracks, and my parents live in remote countryside and look over fields. And I just remember seeing the cave drawings and then standing in the field and just channeling my kind of inner cave woman. I'm just looking at these beasts which are ancient, and this is ancient land, and the charcoal is an ancient way of making a mark, and just connecting with his deep connecting with drawing, and that impulse, that desire to make a mark and capture what you see. And my nephew at the time, Jack wasn't born then, Jack wasn't around, but my nephew, who was small at the time, I remember him being like watching me, and I was so in a trance doing this drawing. I could feel the cows. I could have a sense of the sunlight and the movement and the sounds. And
What's your relationship to that history of drawing as well?
that I want to be connected to it. I want to be part of it. And I went to art school in the mid-90s, and my art history started in 1960. And there was a break from it. There was a rupture from that kind of handing on of knowledge, that unfortunately it's like almost like I was in the wrong time or something. And my boyfriend at the time was Greek, and he taught me so much from his education. I remember we went to the Prado, and I learned, and my parents loved art, and we had books. My mom's an artist, so I had that from home. But I was also, what was happening in the art world, or what was kind of put forward as important or relevant was not so deeply connected to a deeper history, I think. But I talk very clumsily about this because it's quite emotional. I think, I talked clumsily about that art school time, I think. One way I've managed to say it is that I wanted to make I arrived wanting to make drawings, and I couldn't speak about them in a critique type situation because I realized that I didn't think drawing, I lived it. And I think that's quite key to how I work and what I assume and what I hold important. That will
Was your
out. Go ahead.
was your drawing practice well received at art school?
No, I arrived painting and drawing at a very particular time. It was 1995, and I had an amazing head of painting at Winchester School of Art, Vanessa Jackson, and I'm still in contact with her and friends. Amazing artist and brilliant woman, but sadly she left actually in my second year to go to the Royal Academy, and there was a whole kind of exodus of people who'd been there teaching for a long time who were connected. I think they were working in a more traditional way, I would say, and a new wave of young artists came in, and um, and drawing, I think, was well, I this is how I understand it. It didn't feel like it was enough, and you certainly you couldn't. If you weren't armed with all of the critical like apparatus to like to hold it up conceptually, then you were gonna not, it wasn't gonna be an easy ride. Let's move to the next one and see what happened next, because I don't know how. Yes, so then I'm in Paris. This is, it's chronological, obviously. So I'm in Paris, and again I do that thing where I need a studio space, even though it's not very practical with how we were living and what was going on at the time. But I took a studio space that was on the other side of Paris. And I put these two drawings together because the drawing on the right I made alongside students in a drawing class taught by a wonderful colleague. And I went in as a student and I drew alongside the students, which I've always done and I continue to do. And I think we were asked to bring in something that was broken, but this had been a present from a friend called Hélène. So it's a rose plant from Hélène, and I took that in as my subject to draw, and I got really immersed in it. And then, so that's a small drawing, and the one on the left is bigger than me, and that was made when I was pregnant. And that looks so obvious now that it's a kind of pregnancy drawing, but I didn't really think about it at the time. But there's this growing being inside of me when I was making that. I was heavily pregnant when I made that, and it was huge. It's absolutely huge. So we can move to the next one. And then Jack was born, and lots of you know Jack in 2014. You've drawn him, and he's very much part of the way that I talk about my work and how I make work, and he inspires me. And so he was just a year old, or just a year and a half old, and he didn't sleep. And I think the moms that I speak to, artist moms that I speak to, were often discussing that. But so he didn't sleep a lot, but the times that he did in his nap time, I would maybe have 20 minutes. This was the sleep cycle. 20 minutes was like the shortest time, but it might even go to an hour if I was lucky. I made these small drawings, black and white drawings of bits of plants and bits of things that were around. And I made them all in black and white, thinking I have never been up so much in the night in my entire life. And I spent all my time rocking him and dreaming. And so these black and white drawings were the basis of then prompting me to ask a friend of mine who lives in an old cafe to which happened to have this black wall. I asked her if I could make an exhibition in there. So this was totally my design, and I wasn't invited to do an exhibition. I just thought I'm going to have an exhibition, and I made this drawing about this time of year with chalk, simply chalk and erasure on the wall. And it actually, I wanted to put that detail in because it was quite magical and close up, but you can't see that on the bigger slide. So
and
that was
what were you
night
responding to as you made it? Was it to the memory of these plants, of this imagery? Were you using supporting drawings you already made, or any other reference material?
That's a really good point, because I was just walking across the park today, and it was elderberry flowers, and it was bits of branches and plant that were in the park, like windfall. and I took the real things in. So the small ones were like preparation for, you know, for what the materials could do, and then this was I worked from real branches that I collected, which are all actually out and blooming right now. Yeah, it was a very cool opening, that one. I asked my dad to bring his vinyl collection. I had very specific ones because she had a record player, and he played his vinyl. He loved it, and those of you know as well, my dad loves, well, that's where all my love of music. He was very happy being the DJ with his vinyl. I suppose I love drawing as an excuse to have a party as well.
That is what your drawing classes kind of feel like, that we're all invited to a really wonderful party, a really wonderful open party that also feels really special and intimate.
Yeah, and everyone's invited, obviously. Yeah. Okay, next one. So this these two slides I put together because on the left is like one of the first posters I made for Drawing is Free. And I don't know if I don't really need to go too in detail what it is all about, but because most of you take part. But this was this initiative that I dreamt up in the private art school in Paris, wanting to share my space and this privilege with as many people as possible. And they allowed me to have 1 hour a week where I could open the school to anyone to come and draw together. And what we've drawn from then until now is each other to the length of a song. That's been the heartbeat of the project. So that's on the left. And then this was this time last year, marking their 10-year anniversary of doing this Drawing is Free project, which is on a Monday. It's always been 9 to 10 in the morning. I've added the evening session, which means I can connect with people in other parts of the world or after work. So it's always been this Monday morning kind of launch into a week. And I think this is as Jack was very small at that point. And so I would drop him off at creche and I'd run to school, and I was running a department, and it was a responsible job, and I had little time for my own practice. And this was a way to remind myself or center myself with drawing every week. And I did it without fail, which I still do now without fail. And I think that's what people have told me has been really important to them, is that even if you've drawn for yourself, if you've gone into that space with your work and as part of your week, it just does some good. So the exhibition last year was a party as well, and we did dance at the end. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just wondered whether the scale of Drawing is Free has changed the nature of it, or whether it still feels sort of the same. Because I mean, you get up to 300 people at a time now, don't you? Or close to hundreds, over 100.
And it does, but it's uncanny, and I don't know how to explain it. I think people who draw with me will agree. It does feel intimate. Even it feels the same, and it went online during COVID, before it was in person. But what's been magic about that is I can share this experience with more people. That's brilliant. And it doesn't change, the screen doesn't change it for me. I feel it's as intimate as being in a room with somebody. But I have to say, this is important to say about the left-hand image, is that I was doing this from 2013, and then in 2019, just quietly doing every week. Sometimes one person would turn up, sometimes 20, I would just do it. I'd just do it. And then in 2019, I got an email from Joe Woodhouse, who sadly passed away, a friend of mine, and he he said, would I be interested in taking part in a conference about drawing that he was making with Mike Collier and Essen Kaya in Newcastle, and talk about drawing is free. And I was like, bloody hell, how did he know about this? Like, what, how, it was just, I felt so flattered that he was interested in it, and that I would, and then he sent through like who was speaking as part of this conference. And I was like, oh my God, Anita Taylor, Tanya Kovacs, Kelly Sharpening, like all my heroines were all at this, going to be there, and we're going to be speaking. And so I thought, I've got to do a really good job. But I couldn't, I put all these slides together and I couldn't talk about drawing is free without crying. It was terrible. It was because it was so emotional. It was so close to my heart. And I kept imagining the audience, and I'm not very good at those big public speaking things, like formal things. And anyway, with Tom and Jack, I practiced and I practiced, and then and I did it without crying. And that moment, thanks to Joe, I would say, changed the whole rest of the course of my life, I would say, that moment. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. So we can move on. So these are a couple of drawings, recent drawings that I like, that I made. And we all know that as part of Drawing is Free on Mondays, and we all know that we win some and lose some, but we just keep doing it. And what I love is that I'm with this growing group of people who are all learning to draw. We're just learning to draw. It's this ongoing process, it's ongoing. And we know these breakthroughs, and they happen and then they go away. You know, it's like the work. Like 1 week it's working really well and then it doesn't, and we're trying to figure it out. But we all are honest about it just being a process that's endlessly challenging, endlessly difficult. It's amazing. But these are
what makes a drawing work for you? I mean, what makes you like a drawing that you've made?
I think where every part of it is meant to be there. I think, and then there's something mysterious and arresting about the face and the presence of the person. Yeah, they're like, these two is like they're looking at me. There's something there that's bigger than me. Maybe, I don't know. But it's when every part of the drawing, when every part of it works. And I think in those fast poses, we get to that because we don't have time to fiddle about with it. You know, the more you fiddle about often, the more. But then saying that, Jake, you don't fiddle about at all. You erase and array, and you every layer has an intensity with your work. I would say.
I always think I just take great delight in fiddling around with my drawings, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think the layering stops it being, I don't know, getting too slick. Because I think sometimes you get to a point where you're creating I don't know, an image that has moved away from a sense of truth and is into artifice in some way. And I think then you've got to push it back and you've got to keep the search in the drawing. And I think it's not not to use the word illustration pejoratively, but I think an illustration often has an endpoint to it. And so it's an answer to a question, to a brief. And I always think a really exciting drawing just continues to ask questions of the subject, of the material, of you. And so I think a drawing that kind of feels like it's remained quite open. I think, you know, these have it in them. There's something in there that isn't, I don't know, it's still searching. And I think that search is exciting because it's inviting us into your search for something in the subject and in the materials. And I think that's something really exciting about drawing, that search is evident still. A painting can sometimes cover it up, or a sort of finished piece of work that can sometimes lose that sense of search and curiosity.
Yeah, and I really learned that from working with you in Wales, or next to you in the room next to you. It's, as someone who works quickly, often, I mean, mostly I've had to learn to work quickly because I haven't had time, or I work in between times, or um, but I love the time invested in your work, and the endurance of it, and the kind of it's not, fiddling's not the right word. But then I was thinking, well, you're the best drawing fiddler that I know. But no, but it's not fiddling. It's different. There's a different word. It's got to be the search. It's a searching, is exactly as you said there. Yeah, and staying with it, staying with the work over time, and saying that's not enough yet. That's not enough. It's not enough. Keep going. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Um,
Well, last talk we had the wonderful Roy Eastland, who I think is constantly searching in his drawings, and they're made over a huge amount of time, but none of the marks in them feel unnecessary. All of them feel like they're contributing something to the drawing moving forward, and it's exciting. But it's also exciting to see it in such a short, energetic, glimpsed drawing like these.
it's like being a long distance runner, that, which I'm terrible at. I think I like the sprint or the dance. You guys have got more of the long distance. Maybe I'm working towards that. I'm working towards that, I think. But next one. And then this was key too. So the Drawing is Free was happening at Paris College of Art, as it turned from Parsons to Paris College of Art. But I also wanted to take it out of that space and try other ways of engaging people with drawing. And because I was spending so much time in the parks and gardens, carrying Jack around and being with him, I thought I invented this project, Drawing is Free in the Garden, and I made sketchbooks that were free for people to use, and made prompts to invite people to look closely at the plants and trees and flowers that were growing around them. What one of the There's a little community garden near here, and I happened to see a poster inviting people to make a proposal for the quartier to bring people together around an activity. And I applied and I had an interview, and I got a little budget, and which involved buying a picnic and having these sketchbooks printed. And I have very beautiful images of these workshops I did in this community garden in the park opposite. And this poster, it was a drawing. Jack was 25 months old, and it's his drawing. And on the right, I was 39 at the time, and I put his drawing and my drawing together, and for the poster. And I wanted to show visually that my project, or what I'm about with drawing, is without age limit, is without those kind of criteria that like separate people in activities. Sometimes I think drawing is free. I've said this in different ways, but it's like being at a wedding or something, where people at all ages come together and have a good time. So I want people to be fearless of drawing as well. And this is just ongoing, because I was invited to make similar kind of materials for a community garden in the 18th arrondissement. So that's just happened. So I continue to do that in different ways, and work in nature in the city, because I'm always seeking it out, and I'm looking at it, and I encouraging people to look at it. So next one. And also this is something that still has a life, which is these are two examples of playground drawings that I made when Jack was small and we were in playgrounds a lot, and it was a way to make work, you know, when you have a little one, to have your eye on at the same time. I love the shapes and the colors and the shadows cast from playground structures, and these are playful, so it's watching children move around these structures and invent and be
And are
happy.
these made in the moment in situ?
No, these are made for, some are, and then I have, these aren't sketchbook drawings, but there are sketchbook drawings, and then they were made when I took photographs too, and then they were made at home. So I've made, this has become a project. So it was not long after I posted them on Instagram, and a colleague, an art writer, Lillian Davies, colleague and friend, wrote to me and said, that's amazing. She has 3 children, 2 of them are around Jack's age. And she said, I was actually writing about artists who work with the playground as a theme, and I'd love to talk to you about it. And we had an amazing conversation before COVID, about play, about playground spaces, and we've since recorded a conversation that we had and these drawings that they've been published as a book. But I think it's just to note here, all the color comes in now, you know. At the beginning my work's black and white, and then the color, it just gets more and more colorful. I noticed that as I was putting it together. But yeah, this was before COVID, which was a different time. I see it that way. So those are those drawings. And next one. And then, so I'd done this this talk in Newcastle, invited by Joe and Essen and Mike, and there were, I told you that Anita and Tanya were there, and I thought, because I'd met Anita and she seemed to like my talk, I could write to her and say, is it possible to come to Drawing Projects UK? And I went with my friend Alice Scott Hawkins, that some of you know. She draws with us on Mondays. And we decided to leave our kids, Alice has got 2, in that summer, just to leave them for a week and draw together and like commit to our work again. So that's another moment of like, despite everything going on, we have to keep this as important. You know, it's something that we invest in. And this is a drawing I made of Alice that's very big, and you can see it on the next. It's probably inspired by being in Anita's space, because those of you who know Anita's drawing, they're incredible and they are huge. So I think having them around me was, yeah, gave me the courage to do this. So if you could move to the next one, you'll see how big it is. So that's how big it was, and Alice looking lovely in front of it. And then I've put next to it this front cover of a book that I made there called Drawing Through Things, which seems to be what I've done over these years and continue to do. But also because I realize how many books I make. I have loads, tons of them, little artist books that it's been a way of compiling images and thoughts and to work quickly and resolve something, you know, into a form. So I'd like to show those one day, because I have a lot of them, and they span a lot of ideas, and so that's that. And then the next one. And this, unfortunately, I don't have a good image of the entire drawing. It's in Alice's loft in Southampton. she took it home for me. I have a video of me kind of snaking up this drawing, but on the left, this is a drawing, and you'll see when I talk about what I'm doing now, is so related to this drawing, which I never had time to resolve, or it was like the beginning of something that I couldn't then return to because COVID happened and we were locked down and I had no more space. But it's kind of part body parts, my body parts, and part print of a dress.
Mhm.
And on the right, I realized that when I was looking back over these photographs, I'd taken a photograph of this tiger moth on the window, and the drawing and the garment and the kind of body of work that I've been working on in my studio that I'm going to show in a couple of weeks is called Tiger Moth. And I didn't remember seeing this moth here, but it was connected to this drawing. And Jack the other day asked my friend Emily, he said, how do you know when you've got a spirit animal? And how do you get to choose your spirit animal? And Emily was like, no, they find you. But I just love this creature, like, was there and is now again. It's anyway, that's, I think if you're open to noticing these patterns or links through the work that you make over time, then that's how you can make sense of things. Anyway, I do. Next slide. And this is when I met you, Jake. So I was there just before in 2019, and then 2020, COVID, the lockdowns happened, and Anita wrote to me and said, would I like to be drawing is free in residence online at Drawing Projects UK. And when I said earlier about the kind of this really changed my life, I'm so grateful to Anita's invitation and believing in me and giving me the opportunities that she did, because that really did build, this community that I am so grateful to have and work with. So many of those artists came from this point. So during that draw, there was a budget, and I did workshops, and I organized this teaching drawing symposium. You were part of one of them, Jake, and not on this one.
Well, I just attended your very generous invitation to have conversations about drawing, which I just thought was the most wonderful idea.
That
I mean,
was, but I was like, when I came off that conversation with you, I was like, why have I not met this man before? That's mad. And it was brilliant. I met wonderful people during those conversations. Yeah, I just thought, who wants to talk about drawing with me? And we just happily did, didn't we?
yeah, I just thought what a great invitation. Brilliant, and it delivered in every possible way.
It
So,
just delivered, yeah. But then, so that was then, and then I was later then invited to write the education pack for the Trinity Boy Wolf Drawing Prize, which again has just been such an amazing, opportunity to meet artists. And I know some of them are here, artists who've exhibited as part of it and all that stuff. And I'm particularly proud of this postcard I made for last year's, where I went through all the artist statements who'd been accepted into the prize, and I took the verbs that seemed to reoccur, the ones that that people seem to collectively adhere to somehow, why they draw. So that's a postcard just to kind of remind yourself why to do it. So the next one. And this, some of you might remember drawing Yoi. So Yoi Choi was my student at Paris College of Art. One of those extraordinary people where just has an amazing energy and amazing person in so many ways. And so continued to work with her and support her, like beyond being her teacher. And and I invited her to be the model for this one of the first like really public online Zoom drawing sessions. And we were both so nervous. I mean, she should obviously be a lot more nervous than me because she was the one modeling, but we both, but it was electric. She was amazing. And I remember all the comments coming afterwards, like, wow, wow. And it's like, she really does. I always say to her, she has this, manages to kind of break through the pixels or something and be incredibly present for all of us when we draw her. So these were my drawings of her at yeah, they're important drawings for me. Marking like really like a marker of what is possible through the screen, I think, which Draw Brighton you do all the time. I mean, well, you were probably exploring this around the same time, weren't you? That was the all.
That's it. I
Yeah.
think a whole load of us were, and I think that was really exciting because for those of us that are used to being in an environment where we're drawing in a room with people, the idea that the screen could actually be a meaningful way to connect with a subject, I think was quite surprising, but really exciting because it opens up this international community of people united by drawing. I think that's really special. And so I'm so pleased that you've continued this, that we've been able to continue this, that we can still draw together in this space.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not it's like online on purpose.
Yeah, yeah, it's no
Yeah.
longer we're no longer forced to be online.
Yeah, it's like a choice that this works, in so many ways it works. Um, Next one, please. And then this was work I made during lockdown when we were only allowed out for an hour a day here in Paris, and all the gardens and parks were closed. And I would collect with Jack just plants and flowers that were growing on the street, and I painted them with what I had. So that this like series began during lockdown but continues today. I like it. I think this work is about making something beautiful out of nothing, and about working with what I have. My husband had an amazing teacher who changed his life actually, and he would say, "It's not what you've got; it's what you do with what you've got." And I think about that. So this is what I had at the time, but they've turned into a very special, collection that I still am compelled to make once in a while. Yeah. Next one. And this was lockdown downtime as well. Or COVID time at least. And I put this in, Jake, because I know you like this drawing.
I do.
So I was like, oh, well, I'll impress Jake with my drawing.
Yes.
That was yeah, that was in our space. And this was Jack draw. I remember lying on the sofa being really tired, and he was listening to his audiobook and drawing, and even though I was so tired and not feeling great, I'm like, no, I've got to draw him. It's amazing. He looks amazing. I love the still the anchor of the table, and then this moving boy and his limbs all trying to capture them. But I think I had a talk with a wonderful artist friend, Susie Wilson. Some of you all know her. She's a printmaker. Yesterday, and she was lovely. And she said, you have a way of bringing your creative work into everything, into every part of your life. And I think I was thinking about her saying that and why. And maybe it's just I've kind of I so needed to do I so when you're a creative person, you so need to do it that even when you've got to earn money and have a job and do things, you know, you still got to find ways to do it. Otherwise, you don't feel very well. I find. So it's just been a like determination to like in the cracks or in between times to like keep doing it, but not as a not as an art practice that's kind of gallery focused or those kind of things. Although maybe that will happen one day, I don't know. But it's really like a rhythm and a part of who I am and how I live. And I think I hope and I think just from what artists have told me who take part in my workshops and things, I think people identify with that because it's saying that it all has worth, you know. A drawing made at a kitchen table while your baby's asleep, or you know, in the staff room at work or something. You know, it has as much worth, um, I believe. Next one. And then more color, and this is I think we're coming to the end. So in the recent times I think those flowers on packaging made me see in a certain way color and forms, shapes, and I was also using what I had around, and I made these very big applique pieces with scraps of material that we had at home, and it was like a way of making a big painting in a small space that was yeah, that didn't involve, you know, paint and fumes and all of that stuff. So I've thought of textiles like painting since then. And this was Angela Maddock, my friend, who lots of you know, who we worked together because she's a textile artist, and I learned from her. And she draws with us on Monday. We had the opportunity to do this residency just up the road from here it was a squatted old school, like and we had 2 weeks to work together, and I made this applique piece, which I think is, as I say, directly related to the kind of flowers on packaging, and the plants are street flowers again, and I found this parasol on the streets of Rotterdam where my sister lives, and yeah, it's a cape that as you can see, and I believe everybody needs a cape of because you feel like a superhero in it, or you feel somehow there's some kind of presence takes over when you put it on. Yeah, so that's that. So the clothing and making things from nothing is still very much, is really what I'm working on now. So next slide. This is my last one, because I think this represents what I'm about, I think. And this is the stills from an animated drawing, which was an exercise I made for my Patreon group, where I found footage of a pigeon taking flight, and we drew it slowly each frame, and captured each frame, and then made it into a moving image. And I'm putting this in because I thought of this earlier, how to describe it, is I don't know who saw Yoko Ono's show recently at the Tate Modern, but I heard a curator talk about her, saying that what Yoko Ono was like the composer, and through her prompts and invitations and the people made the music. And I really feel like this in this work, and maybe what I hope with drawing is free is somehow I'm just conducting something, and everyone is making their own music, you know. There are, I think, I don't know how many of these animated pigeons there are out there, but there's a lot. And I would love to see them all together in an exhibition. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Everyone's pigeon all taken off. That would be a magic sight. And actually, when I went to the Yoko Ono show, I was taking around a group of girls from St. Paul's Girls' School, and there was some girls from the local comprehensive that were also part of the project, and those were the three that were kind of that stuck with me, probably because they knew that was one of their kind. But they were brilliant, and I talked to them at the end, and they said I said, what did you make of this, you know, this show? Because they were 16, and it was, you know, that it's a lot to take in or understand. And one of them said, I felt like I was part of something. And I thought that's a beautiful thing to say. That you go to an exhibition and you're not distanced from it, you feel part of it. And I think that also in my work, that's something that in all the different things I do, whether it's teaching, it's all combined, because I want to be connected. I want people to feel part of something. Yeah. I think that's it, Jake.
Thank you for inviting us to be part of your great drawing party as well. I feel like this is the place to be, Chloe. So much. This has been such a wonderful, sensitive journey through your own experiences with drawing, and I'm just so grateful that you've taken the time to share it with us. Thank you. Now, I'm conscious of time and your time, Chloe. Normally, we'd have a few minutes for questions, but we are a few minutes past the hour. How are you for time?
It's fine if people are happy. I'm happy to take questions. I didn't really. You should have jollied me on, Jake.
Oh, well, I
For
think
hours.
like a good drawing, I think there was no word that was unnecessary and superfluous there, so I don't think it would have been it would have been appropriate. I'll give everyone 6 minutes. If anyone's got a question that they want to put to Chloe, you've got 6 minutes to throw us something. But we may well all be satisfied with that wonderful journey through your work, Chloe. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Um,
What's coming next?
David, yeah, David's asked what's coming next. Go on, tell us. Tell us about the open studio as it's coming.
Well, unfortunately, it's on the same night that David's got his MA show, so I feel bad about that. What is well, I would love to make opportunities to work with the artists that I work with online in real life situations. I would love that. I would love to make a book out of the drawing is free, about the booklets that I write and the work that the artists make, because I was actually looking through the Padlets, the kind of 24 or 23 Padlets of work that people have made and contributed to monthly with such dedication, and it's like it blows you away, honestly. It makes you realize how many artists there are out there. You know what I mean? There are so many amazing artists out there, and they don't get seen.
I think you're teasing a few out that might not have been seen otherwise as well. So whether you're making new artists of everybody or not is another that's the matter for debate, but you're certainly allowing them to flourish.
Well, I think it's well, we talked about permission, didn't we, earlier? Isn't it? It's saying that you can do it, and yeah, I love that. I don't with what's happening next. I need to learn how to. I need to learn. There's some skills I really want to learn. And I want to make longer a work that I spend more time with. And I know I'm moving towards painting. I know that's going to happen at some point when I have the resources and the space and that kind of thing. We got there. I think there's a question there.
Yeah, Jonathan's just asked, nice to see you, Jonathan, as well. Just asked about the advantages of drawing online subjects. Are there particular advantages, do you think?
I think it just means you can go anywhere. You can draw anything and go anywhere. Do you know what I mean, Jake?
Yeah.
I think with my workshops, I think, oh, well, this month we're going to go underwater and look at the ocean. It's like, why not? I mean, you can really you can bring so many things into and really be immersed in it. I think that's what it feels like.
I found that it's allowed us to hold a community together in a way that we couldn't before. Because we often used to find with our in-person life classes that when someone, particularly when someone went and had a baby, then we wouldn't see them for 6 years, at least 10 years, maybe. But, so they disappear and they'd want to be here and we'd want to make space for them as well. But just for practical reasons, they disappeared from the life drawing scene for a while, but now they don't. Now they keep coming along. They've just got baby in arm as they're drawing from home. So I think in terms of accessibility and holding a community together, it's been easier to maintain that community with the online link, even if they come in person and online. I think it's helped to hold a wider community together.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, and yeah.
Susan has asked a question that feels so big that maybe it's the point to to end the talk as well. Susan's asked about the difference between painting and drawing, but I feel like what we need to do is we need to wait for you to have made these paintings, Chloe, and then we need to have a kind of a sequel. Um, so I think I'll draw things to a close there, no pun in.
Yeah,
Um,
sequel. I've got to make the paintings first, and then I'll
Gotta
tell you
make the pages first. Um, Chloe, thank
the
you
dark
so
here.
much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's gone very dark.
Both here, it's okay.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. It was. I'm gonna have a glass of wine now. um, Take care. Can I just sign off?
Thank Yes, thank you everyone. It's been so
Thank
lovely having you
you.
here.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you,
Bye.
Chloe.
See you Monday. See you
Lovely.
Monday.
Thank you.